Gym staff bans Keanu Reeves for not being a member. Turns out he owns the building. When Keanu Reeves tried to help someone being bullied at an exclusive gym, staffs not only kicked him out, they also banned him. The way Keanu Reeves handled the situation will leave you in awe. The low hum of pop music reverberated off the sleek mirrored walls of the Icon Elite Gym, a pristine fitness center known as much for its exclusivity as for its state-of-the-art equipment. Polished weights gleamed under bright, fluorescent lights, and members in designer activewear chatted near the smoothie bar, sipping overpriced green juices between casual sets. Danny, a new gym member, sat on the edge of a weight bench in the corner, nervously fidgeting with the hem of his oversized hoodie. His face flushed red as he tried to figure out how to adjust the leg press machine. The weights clanged awkwardly as he fumbled, and a few heads turned in his direction. From across the room, a group of gym regulars, tanned, toned, and dripping with the confidence of people who'd never felt out of place here, started to whisper and laugh. "Think he's ever even seen a gym before?" one of them said, loudly enough for the sound to carry. "Probably wandered in off the street," another snickered, sipping from a shaker bottle. Danny's hands froze on the machine. He ducked his head, pretending not to hear them, but his movements were stiff and jerky. The flush on his face deepened as he muttered something under his breath and grabbed his water bottle, clearly ready to retreat. At that moment, a man on a nearby treadmill slowed to a stop, stepping off the machine with quiet deliberation. He wore a plain gray shirt, well-worn jeans, and a simple black cap pulled low over his face. Keanu Reeves, in his usual understated way, had slipped into the gym unnoticed by most, blending into the background as he often preferred. But now his sharp eyes had zeroed in on the scene unfolding near the weight benches. He watched as Danny slung his bag over his shoulder, shoulders hunched in defeat, and started to shuffle toward the exit. The bullies chuckled loudly, their mockery growing bolder as the boy retreated. Keanu stepped forward. "Hey," he said, his voice calm but firm. The group turned to him, surprised. "Do you need help with that?" Keanu continued, addressing Danny. Danny stopped in his tracks, blinking in confusion. "What?" he stammered. "The leg press," Keanu said, gesturing toward the machine. "I can show you how to use it if you'd like." The gym regulars exchanged glances, their smirks faltering as they registered the quiet authority in Keanu's tone. One of them, a tall man in a muscle tank, crossed his arms and stepped closer. "Mind your own business," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The kid's out of his depth. He doesn't belong here." Keanu turned to face him, his expression unshaken. "Everyone belongs here," he said evenly. The words hung in the air, and for a moment the room fell silent. Then the man laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Who even are you?" he sneered. "You don't exactly look like a member yourself." Before Keanu could respond, a gym employee, a sharp-tongued woman named Christine, with a clipboard and a badge that read "Manager," hurried over. Her face was pinched with irritation as she sized up the scene. What's going on here?" Christine asked, her eyes landing on Keanu. "Nothing," the tall man said, waving a hand dismissively. "This guy's just causing a scene." Christine turned to Keanu, frowning. "Sir, are you a member of this gym?" Keanu's gaze flicked to her, his posture relaxed. "No," he said simply. Christine's expression tightened. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she said, gesturing toward the door. Danny's voice broke through the tension, hesitant but defiant. "He was just trying to help," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. I didn't ask him to, but he wasn't causing any trouble." Christine ignored him, her focus still on Keanu. "If you're not a member, you can't be here. Those are the rules." Keanu's lips pressed into a thin line. He glanced briefly at Danny, who was now clutching the strap of his bag like a lifeline. Then he turned back to Christine. "Rules are important," Keanu said, his voice measured, "but so is treating people with respect." The tall man snorted. Christine, clearly uncomfortable with the growing tension, raised a hand. "All right, that's enough," she said. "If you're not leaving, I'll have to call security." Keanu didn't argue. Instead, he stepped aside, giving Danny a small nod of encouragement before making his way toward the front desk. Behind him, the group of bullies resumed their laughter, their voices echoing through the gym. Outside the glass doors of the gym, the evening air was crisp and quiet. Keanu Reeves stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the cold. He looked up at the illuminated sign above the entrance. Icon Elite Gym. It read in sleek, modern letters. His lips quirked into the faintest smile, though there was no humor in it. It wasn't the first time he'd visited the gym, though he hadn't set foot inside in months. He had bought the building 5 years ago, part of a small portfolio of properties he managed quietly. The gym's operations were left to a management company, and Keanu had chosen to stay anonymous, preferring to let the business run itself without interference. But moments like these reminded him why he sometimes needed to show up. He adjusted his cap, pulling it low, and began walking toward a quiet bench nearby. As he sat down, his mind drifted back to his younger years. Back when places like that gym weren't a refuge, but a battlefield. He had been just a kid then, awkward and uncertain, stumbling through adolescence with too much on his mind. Moving from city to city with his family meant he was often the new kid, the outsider. Gym class had been the worst. He could still hear the taunts of boys bigger and faster than him, their laughter cutting through the air like knives. "You're not strong enough. You're too slow. You don't belong here." Those words had clung to him, leaving scars invisible to the world but etched deep into his spirit. It wasn't until years later, when he found solace in acting and martial arts, that he began to rebuild his confidence. The physical training had become a source of strength, not just for his body, but for his mind. And there was one moment he would never forget. He had been 16, struggling through yet another gym class, when a stranger, a substitute coach filling in for the day, had pulled him aside after watching him fail a weightlifting attempt for the third time. "You've got potential, kid," the coach had said, his voice kind but firm. "The strongest people aren't the ones who start out on top. They're the ones who keep getting up." That small gesture, a single sentence, had stuck with him. It had been the first time anyone in that environment had looked at him as more than just a scrawny kid who didn't belong. Keanu leaned back against the bench, his breath misting in the air. That memory had been a quiet compass for him ever since, guiding him in moments when he saw someone else struggling the way he once had. And that's why he couldn't ignore what he'd seen tonight. The image of Danny, head down, shrinking under the weight of ridicule, gnawed at him. He saw too much of himself in the boy's nervous fidgeting, his desperate attempt to blend into a space that seemed determined to reject him. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Alan, the property manager who oversaw Icon Elite Gym. "Alan," he said when the line picked up, "it's Keanu. I need to talk to you about the gym." There was a pause, then Alan's voice came through, chipper and professional. "Keanu, good to hear from you. Everything running okay over there?" Keanu's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now. "Not exactly. I was there tonight. Saw some things I wasn't happy about." Alan hesitated. "You were there?" "Yes," Keanu said simply, "and I want to address it." Over the next few minutes, he explained what he had witnessed. The bullying, the dismissive staff, the manager's decision to prioritize regulars over doing the right thing. He kept his tone measured, but Alan could hear the frustration simmering beneath the surface. "I've trusted this place to reflect the kind of values I believe in," Keanu said, his voice low. "If that's not happening, I'm going to make sure it changes." Alan stammered through assurances, promising to look into it immediately, but Keanu wasn't finished. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. "Let the staff know I'll be speaking with them, and I'd like to meet with the manager personally." With that, he ended the call, slipping the phone back into his pocket. The gym's illuminated sign loomed in the distance, its glow cutting through the night. Keanu sat on the bench a moment longer, the cold air sharp against his skin. Tomorrow, he thought, the conversation would continue. Not as Keanu Reeves, the movie star, or the anonymous landlord, but as someone who had once been that boy, sitting on the edge of a weight bench, just hoping for someone to say, "You belong here." By the time Keanu walked into the gym again the next evening, the air seemed sharper, heavier. Danny was already there, timidly moving between machines, doing his best to avoid eye contact with the same group of bullies from the night before. They stood by the squat racks, loudly swapping stories and laughing, their voices echoing off the mirrored walls. Keanu scanned the room, his face calm but focused, his cap pulled low as usual. As he stepped further in, a voice called out behind him. "Hey, you again!" Christine, the gym's manager, strode toward him, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Her tone was sharp, her annoyance evident. She stopped a few feet away, crossing her arms as she looked him up and down. "I thought we made it clear yesterday," she said. "This gym is for members only." Keanu met her gaze evenly. "I'm here to make sure people are treated with respect," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Christine snorted, glancing over her shoulder at the staff clustered behind the front desk. "Respect? Is that what you think this is about?" She gestured around the room, where the bullies had started to take notice of the commotion. "This is a private gym. People pay a premium to be here. If you're not a member, you don't get to make the rules." Danny, who had been watching nervously from the bench press, froze mid-motion. His face flushed as he realized the scene was drawing more attention, including from the group of regulars who had mocked him the day before. One of the bullies, the tall man in the tank top, smirked and leaned against a nearby rack of weights. "Look who's back," he said loudly, his voice dripping with mockery. "You bringing your hero complex again, buddy?" Keanu turned slightly, his eyes flicking to the group before returning to Christine. He didn't rise to the bait, his calm demeanor steady as ever. "I think we all deserve to be treated with dignity," he said, addressing both Christine and the room at large. "And I think this gym could do better." Christine let out a sharp laugh. "Dignity? This isn't some public rec center. You know what? I don't care who you are or what you think gives you the right to come in here and act like some kind of savior." Keanu tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You don't know who I am, do you?" he said, his voice steady. Christine rolled her eyes. "Should I? You're just some guy who thinks he's better than everyone else." Behind her, one of the staff members at the desk whispered something to a coworker, their voice rising in disbelief. "Wait, isn't that Keanu Reeves?" Christine froze for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she turned back to Keanu, finally taking a closer look. Recognition dawned, her expression shifting from irritation to surprise. "Oh," she said flatly, blinking. "You're that actor from those action movies." The bullies exchanged glances, their smirks growing wider. One of them, the tall man, snickered. "Oh, this is rich," and he said. "Mr. Hollywood thinks he's going to save the day. Hate to break it to you, man, but this isn't the Matrix." The group erupted in laughter, their mocking tone loud and grating. Danny shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between them and Keanu. Christine recovered quickly, her smirk returning. "Look, I don't care if you're Keanu Reeves or the President of the United States. This gym has rules, and if you're not a member, you're trespassing." She raised her voice slightly as if to reassert her authority. "You're banned from this facility, effective immediately." Keanu's jaw tightened slightly, but his expression remained composed. "You're banning me?" he asked, his tone calm. "That's right," Christine said, folding her arms again. "You're done here. You don't get special treatment just because you're famous. This is the real world, and in the real world, you follow the rules like everyone else." Danny took a hesitant step forward, his voice barely audible over the tension in the room. "He was just trying to help." Christine cut him off, her gaze snapping to him. "And you should mind your own business," she snapped. Keanu held up a hand, stopping Danny from speaking further. "It's okay," he said gently, his eyes softening as they met the boys. Turning back to Christine, Keanu adjusted his cap slightly, his posture relaxed but unyielding. "You're right," he said. "This isn't the movies, and I'm not here for special treatment. I'm here because I believe places like this should be better." Christine's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, but she quickly recovered. "Well, maybe you can take those beliefs somewhere else," she said, waving him toward the door. The staff behind her looked visibly uneasy now, some of them exchanging nervous glances. Even the bullies had gone quieter, their laughter fading into awkward mutters. But Christine stood her ground, her confidence brittle but intact. Without another word, Keanu turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing softly in the now silent room. The Icon Elite Gym was unusually quiet the next morning. Christine stood behind the front desk, her demeanor tense as she sipped her third cup of coffee. The fallout from the previous night lingered in her mind, and she couldn't shake the strange mix of guilt and irritation that had settled over her. She had banned Keanu Reeves. The realization still felt surreal. Sure, she hadn't recognized him at first, but even after she'd stood her ground. She'd shown him that celebrity status didn't mean anything in the real world, or so she thought. Her confidence wavered when Alan, the property manager, stormed through the front doors, his phone still pressed to his ear. He looked frazzled, his usually crisp suit slightly wrinkled. Christine frowned, stepping forward to greet him. "Alan," she said, her voice tight. "What's going on?" Alan lowered the phone, his face a mix of frustration and panic. "What's going on?" he repeated incredulously. "I just got a call from the owner of this building. Do you know what you've done?" Christine blinked, momentarily thrown off. "The owner? What are you talking about? Before she could finish, the front doors swung open again. Keanu Reeves stepped into the gym, his black cap still pulled low, his calm presence instantly commanding the room. The staff froze, their eyes wide. Christine's mouth opened and closed as she struggled to find her footing. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice faltering. Keanu didn't answer her. Instead, he looked at Alan, who nodded quickly, pulling a tablet out of his bag. Alan tapped a few times on the screen, then turned it toward Christine. "This," Alan said sharply, pointing to the screen, "is the ownership record for this building. And unless I'm mistaken, the name at the top of the list says Keanu Reeves." The words hit Christine like a freight train. She stared at the screen, her face draining of color. There it was, undeniable. Keanu Reeves, sole property owner. The weight of the revelation sank into the room, and the silence was deafening. The staff behind the desk exchanged horrified looks. Keanu finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You're right, Christine. This isn't the movies," he said, echoing her words from the night before. "But that doesn't mean people should be treated the way you treated me, or anyone else in this gym." Christine stammered, her words tumbling out in a panicked rush. "Mr. Reeves, I didn't know. If I had known, I never would have—" Keanu raised a hand, silencing her. "It shouldn't matter who I am," he said evenly. "What matters is how you run this gym. This is supposed to be a place where people can feel safe and supported, no matter who they are. But last night, I saw the opposite of that." Christine's lips trembled as she tried to respond. I didn't realize—" Keanu's gaze softened slightly, but his voice remained resolute. "You didn't realize because you didn't take the time to care," he said. "You were too busy enforcing rules to see what was actually happening. Bullying, humiliation, people being made to feel like they don't belong. Is that what you think this gym should stand for?" Christine shook her head quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, of course not." Keanu glanced toward Danny, who was standing near the back of the room, his face a mixture of awe and nervousness. He gestured for Danny to step forward. "Danny," Keanu said, his tone kind but clear, "you were here last night. What did you see?" Danny hesitated, looking between Keanu and Christine. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. I saw you trying to help me," he said, his eyes darting toward Christine. "And I saw them—" He gestured toward the bullies. "Laughing at me, at you, and nobody did anything to stop it." Keanu nodded, then turned his attention back to Christine. "This isn't just about me," he said. "This is about everyone who walks through those doors. People come here to improve themselves, not to be torn down." Alan, still holding the tablet, cleared his throat. "Mr. Reeves," he said carefully, "what do you want to do about this?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. He looked around the gym, taking in the faces of the staff, the members, and finally Christine. "I want this place to change," he said. "I want new policies in place to make sure this gym is inclusive and supportive of everyone, regardless of how they look, how experienced they are, or how much money they spend. And I want Christine to take responsibility for what happened last night." Christine's head snapped up, panic flashing across her face. "Mr. Reeves, please." Keanu held up a hand. "I'm not firing you," he said calmly. "But if you want to stay, you need to prove that you're willing to do better. That starts with an apology, to Danny, to the staff, and to anyone else you've treated unfairly." Christine swallowed hard, her face red with shame. She turned to Danny, her voice shaking. I'm sorry, she said, her words stiff but sincere. I should have done better. Danny blinked, clearly shocked. He nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. Keanu looked back at the room. This place has potential, he said, but it needs to live up to it, starting today. As he turned to leave, the room buzzed with whispers, the atmosphere shifting from disbelief to quiet admiration. For everyone watching, it wasn't just about Keanu Reeves being the owner of the building. It was about the way he used his position to make things right. And as Danny watched him go, a small, hopeful smile spread across his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged. Over the following weeks, Icon Elite Gym underwent a transformation, not just in policy, but in spirit. Keanu had followed up with Alan and the management team, working with them to ensure the gym became a place where anyone could feel welcome. New rules were introduced: zero tolerance for bullying, mandatory staff training and inclusivity, and a dedicated outreach program to make the gym accessible to a broader community. Christine, humbled but determined, embraced the changes. She worked closely with Keanu and Alan, taking personal responsibility for creating a better environment. She greeted Danny every time he walked in, often checking in with him during his workouts. Though she still felt the weight of her mistakes, she channeled that guilt into action. As for Danny, he started coming to the gym more regularly. At first, he'd been hesitant, wary of the attention after the dramatic events. But Keanu's quiet words of encouragement lingered with him. You belong here. Slowly, Danny's confidence grew. He no longer avoided eye contact with the other members. He held his head higher, and for the first time, he felt like he had the right to take up space. The bullies who had mocked Danny eventually faded from the scene. They stopped showing up after the new rules were introduced, rules that Keanu had personally signed off on. The space they left behind was filled with new members, people who didn't care about exclusivity or status, but shared a desire to improve themselves in a supportive environment. Keanu, true to his nature, didn't linger in the spotlight. He made a few quiet visits to check on the progress, but avoided fanfare. During one of his last visits, he caught sight of Danny doing bench presses with a trainer nearby, his form strong and steady. Danny spotted Keanu, his face lighting up. He quickly set the barbell down and jogged over, wiping his hands on his towel. Mr. Reeves, he said, beaming. I didn't think I'd see you again. Keanu smiled, his hands in his pockets. Just checking in, he said. Looks like you're doing great. Danny nodded eagerly. Yeah, it's different now. Better. He hesitated, then added, because of you. Keanu's smile softened. Not because of me, he said. Because you didn't give up. That's all you. Danny's grin widened, and he nodded, his chest swelling with pride. As Keanu made his way to the exit, Alan walked alongside him, updating him on the gym's progress. Membership's gone up, Alan said, flipping through notes on his tablet. We're even getting emails from people saying they're joining because of what they heard about the changes. Keanu nodded, satisfied. Good. Let's keep it going. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm, cars honking, pedestrians weaving through crosswalks. Keanu stood for a moment, looking back at the gym's glowing sign. Christine appeared in the doorway, watching him with a cautious but genuine smile. She gave him a small wave, and he returned it before slipping quietly into the crowd. The story of Keanu Reeves in the gym had spread online, of course. People marveled at the twist of him being the building's owner. But more than that, they were moved by how he handled the situation, with grace, humility, and a commitment to doing what was right. But for Keanu, it wasn't about the recognition. As he walked down the busy street, blending into the rush of everyday life, he thought only of the boy on the bench press, standing taller now than ever before. Sometimes the smallest acts, stepping in, speaking up, standing firm, had the power to reshape not just a moment, but an entire community. And for Keanu, that was always enough.